Hey everybody, it's Party Elite with another online battle today. In this one, I take the Dwarfs into battle for the first time in months, I think, against the Vampire Counts led by Captivate. Grumbrindal leads my army with Rune Helm of Zufbar, Foe Seeker, Deadly Onslaught, Flash Bomb, Grumbrindal Has No Fear, and Rune Axe of Grumbrindal. I've got two Runesmiths, both coming in with Forge Fire, the Rune of Wrath and Ruin, and the Rune of Negation, while one also has the Master Rune of Groth One Eye and the Master Rune of Stromny Redbeard. 5 units of Longbeards will hold their own against most Vampire Count infantry, with the help of Rune of Negation especially, while the Slayers will help keep me safe from enemy large units. Finally, I've got 2 units of Rangers and Ulthar's Raiders in the hopes of causing armor-piercing damage in range and in melee combat, and using Marked by Ulthar to make quick work of potential Sternsmen on the field, or Crypt Horrors, or anything else that's high threat level. Alright, as always, we're going to start with a conversation about deployment, and both of us keep it relatively simple, though the Vampire Counts do try something a little clever here. Let's start with my own Dwarven deployment. As you can see, we're all in the trees now, but I will push forward almost right away. I have this front line of Longbeards all ready to fight, while Grumbrindal himself helps protect the center. On either side, I do have a Runesmith right behind the front line as well, again, just to get full coverage across the entire army, make sure everyone gets some support from the Rune of Negation especially. And then, at the back here, I also have these Slayers, able to dive into the front lines if necessary against Crypt Horrors or anything like that, or potentially protect my ranged contingent back here against any, Blood Knights or Black Knights that might come in from the sides or from the rear, and I can shut them down with my Slayers. And of course, as you may have seen, I do have my ranged contingent in the center here. I was hoping to pull off the kill box over here, but unfortunately, it's not going to work out, as you'll see shortly, but it overall pays off. Now let's take a look at the Vampire Counts deployment. Again, relatively simple for the main army over here. We have this front line of Skeleton Warriors pushing through the trees right now. Right behind them, we have all of the Graveguard as well as the Sternsmen in the center, while Manfred von Karstein off to the side over here. You'll notice also way off in the wings, we have the Varix Reavers over here. They're Black Knights with lances and barding, of course. And then over here on this flank, we have the White King as well as the Blood Knights. So, as you can see with the minimap, and you will see throughout this battle, I'm just going to kick it to full speed, I'm actually not able to see the cavalry. And from the get-go, I was a little concerned about something sneaky like this happening, just because, I can see my minimap, I can see exactly what I can't see, rather, but at the same time, I was a little nervous about going out exploring, because if I decided to push out one way or another, I might have been, taken care of, I might have found myself surrounded, put myself into a rough spot. So instead, I decided to hold my ground and just make sure my Slayers are ready for side and rear charges, and definitely keep an eye out on the enemy cavalry, especially the little pips on the minimap, because it's an absolutely wonderful job of making sure these guys completely stay out of view as they come around the sides here. I am going to kick it up a notch, but before I do that, I just want to point out, I try to keep my Slayers within the trees, or right behind the trees, or next to, I should say, so that if the cavalry did decide to come in from the rear positions, they're actually stuck in these forests so that they actually suffer the penalties. So by keeping my Slayers back there, I make sure not only that one unit is hidden, since most people are used to seeing at least one unit of Slayers, this hides one of my units, and then at the same time, if an engagement takes place, I'm able to not only block it off, I also get the advantage of those guys being stuck in the trees. Now you'll see I do widen my lines a little bit, just to prepare and make sure that I'm able to catch the entire Vampire Count front. And the moment I see Manfred actually push off to the side there, I get a little nervous. I didn't check his spells or anything like that. I get a little nervous, and I push my wings up, as you can see, just to make sure that if a Wind of Death comes through, it's not going to take care of my entire front line. He doesn't, in fact, have Wind of Death, but just a precautionary method there. And now we're just going to kick it up ever so slowly here, ever so slightly. You'll see Manfred gets back into his regular position, and at this point, it's time to push forward for engagements. The Skeleton Warriors are close enough. Unfortunately, at this point, I decide that doing the retreating kill box is really not ideal, because I'll just get most of my damage to the Skeleton Warriors. I do still pull back a touch, but on the sides is something very important. I want to isolate the Vampire Counts into very distinct engagements. So you'll see I send my wings in, basically. These Longbeards are about to engage these Skeleton Warriors. These guys are diving in here, and then these Longbeards are going to make sure that there is no central engagement, or there's no clumping where Invocation of Nehek can do a lot of work for the Vampire Count. So I try to separate the engagements into 3 distinct parts, 1, 2, and 3, and it's working out for me so far, though I do have to be careful, obviously. Once the Graveguard arrive, it'll be a bit tougher. Meanwhile, you'll see the Vampire Counts are able to get a full surround, and I'm so busy focusing on the front line situation right now that I completely missed Varix Reavers coming in. Even though they're visible right now, these guys are visible as well. I completely miss it because I'm concentrating on the front. So great timing there. I imagine that was intentional, benefit of the doubt. So wonderfully done, and they're able to tuck into these trees right behind me. And at the same time, you'll see at the front here, I do pop Flash Bomb with Grumbrindal, allowing my Longbeards to pull back. I let Grumbrindal eat the charge from the Skeleton Warriors in the hopes that the Longbeards are actually able to get a rear charge into these guys. Again, just to cause some of that morale damage. I do want to try and take care of the center as quickly as possible, despite that retreating kill box not working out. I want to take care of the center as quickly as possible just to make sure that I'm able to pour through it and then, you know, come from the sides or, you know, again, just reorganize and adjust my approach. At the same time, the runesmiths are going to be pushed in to these side engagements once they do get settled in, but you can see the cavalry has made it through and it's into the trees back here. Meanwhile, the skeleton warriors here are taking a lot of damage, morale damage especially. They're dropping extremely quickly, and we've got the Rune of Wrath and Ruin dropping on the Sternsmen because I do want to try and take care of them ASAP, and the Rune of Wrath and Ruin going down on the Graveguard with great weapons as well. Those, in my opinion, are some of the highest threat units on the field, especially the Sternsmen, because these guys can not only cause a decent amount of damage, they might not be armor piercing, but they'll get a lot of damage through, and they can regenerate as well, so they have the longevity, which I'm very concerned about. So I'm glad to see that they've dove into this central engagement so that my Ulthar's Raiders and my Rangers can take care of them. Meanwhile, you'll notice also the Longbeards over here have been hit by the Fate of Buna. Decent target selection. These guys are taking a lot of hurt, basically lost maybe 50% of their health through the Fate of Buna, but a better target would actually be the Slayers, because then the Vampire Count Cavalry would have full control of the field, and you can see right now the cavalry is pushing in, shutting down my range support, so great work there, making sure I'm not able to get a lot of damage in here. Unfortunately, though, of course, my Slayers are right there, ready to respond. So you'll see the cavalry pushes through, the White Knight, the White King, sorry, pushes through as well, and I'm able to turn these Slayers around, and these Slayers as well. I push them in right away to try and sandwich the enemy cavalry, get them stuck in the trees so that they suffer the penalties, and also get a lot of damage from all around. You'll notice Varix Reavers very quickly dropping in health. Blood Knights took very little damage. They're able to sneak away, but Varix Reavers are falling apart right away. Meanwhile, I also had the Rune of Negation active for a while there in both of these clumps. So again, with the Runesmiths separated like this, I'm able to get my defensive measures up nice and safely, but the Vampire Counts lose out because, as you can see, Invocation of Nehek right now saving this side for the Vampire Counts, while on the right we've got some units crumbling. These guys are going to start taking a lot of damage as the engagements continue, so overall, separating like that was extremely helpful. While in the center here as well, you'll see the Skeleton Warriors already crumbling. They've been crumbling for a while now. They're going to fall apart, and as the enemy cavalry is forced back, you'll notice I do drop Marked by Ulthar onto the Sternsmen and then open shots off. Unfortunately, because it's not ideal positioning, I don't get maximum damage as these guys are obstructed, but overall the Sternsman's health is dropping very quickly as well. At the same time, I am trying to be very careful with Manfred over here, because if he is engaged with the Sword of Unholy Power, he's able to get his winds back. He's able to regenerate his winds of magic. So I want him to be engaged only with Grumbrindal, so I have the upper hand. I don't want him engaging in melee anywhere else, because then he's able to cast more magic, obviously. At the same time, you'll notice over here, I'm actually chasing these guys off with my Slayers. In hindsight, I should have kept one unit of Slayers back here just to protect against any other potential surprises, but Varix Reavers are completely taken care of. A massive waste of money. They only got 9 kills in them, and the Blood Knights as well have taken a decent amount of damage. About a quarter of their health has been wiped out. And as we kick it back into full speed, you'll see in the center here, the Skeleton Warriors continue to fall apart, and the Sternsmen as well, very quickly falling apart, while over here we have Undeath, Resurgent going down, just to make sure that these guys keep their leadership up and their melee defense up as well, because I am getting the upper hand on this side over here. Invocation of Nehek earlier did help, of course, keep this side alive, because you'll see on the right, the advantage is very much mine. You can see the Graveguard with great weapons starting to lose a decent amount of their health very quickly, almost at halfway down these guys, almost at a quarter way down these guys, and of course the Skeleton Warriors themselves have been crumbling for a while now. Sternsman in the center as well, more or less taken care of, and I want to shut these guys down ASAP, obviously. As we push on into full speed, you'll see I'm still trying to close the gap with Grumbrindal here, trying to shut Manfred down. I actually activate the Rune Axe of Grumbrindal just to get the extra speed, but that's nowhere near enough to shut him down. Meanwhile, over here, the Slayers do have to split apart to try and shut down Varix Reavers and also hunt down the Blood Knights over here, while they actually try and push into Grumbrindal to intercept him and hold him back. Not a bad call, but it's more favorable for me because that gives me the opportunity to get these Slayers in here, and the Blood Knights, of course, have to be very careful. So well micromanaged there, making sure that he's able to keep the Blood Knights alive, and Grumbrindal there gets tossed behind by Manfred, unfortunately. And at this point, great spot of this wonderful opening here. The Blood Knights get pushed into my range support, trying to shut it down. Wonderfully done. Great eye, and that's why the one unit of Slayers should have been actually kept back here. Hindsight 2020, though, as these Blood Knights crash through my range contingent, and the Rangers do a decent amount of damage, actually. They are wielding their melee right now, so it does work out for me, but they have managed to shut down my range support. Meanwhile, over here, you'll see the White King actually dives into this engagement with Grimbrindal, so that's a rough spot for me to be in, and at the same time, I have another set of Rune of Negations going down on both of these clumps, both of these engagements. Now, you'll notice also I use my Slayers to rear charge into these Graveguard over here, because I noticed their morale was relatively low, and I feel like if I can get a rear charge in, I can drop that morale to be low enough to start crumbling, and that's exactly what I do. I push these guys in, and you'll notice this unit of Skeleton Warriors here begin to crumble, or continue to crumble, while this unit of Graveguard quickly drop into critical binding. I try to get enough damage in to actually drop these guys. Unfortunately, Invocation of the Heck does go down to keep them alive. Meanwhile, these Slayers are actually pushing in to try and take care of the cavalry down here, but these zombies are brought up by Manfred. Very wonderfully played, just to make sure that I'm not able to get through this gap and actually shut down the cavalry that has pulled away. So great use of zombies there, and at the same time, you'll notice I did pop Grimbrindal Has No Fear. I noticed my leadership was low across the board, and I wanted to make sure I didn't just fall apart now that these guys had access to rear charges. So I had to make sure that morale stayed up. Grimbrindal Has No Fear does go up, while Verex Reavers here continue to crumble as they try to get a rear charge in here. Meanwhile, the Graveguard with great weapons as well, suffering quite handily. This side, remember, got no support from Invocation of the Heck, so these guys are falling apart. Meanwhile, Grimbrindal as well, trying to get out of that situation with the White King, but getting beat on pretty badly. So rough spot there, while my Raiders back here and Rangers opening shots off at Manfred as well. Grimbrindal does get hit by Spirit Leech, so doing a decent amount of damage there to Grimbrindal, quite unfortunate, while these Slayers over here disengage, and now I send them to do a rear charge on these guys as well. And you'll notice now the Blood Knights here make a fatal mistake. They actually push into this range contingent and get caught out by my Slayers, and my Slayers are going to have a field day there. Manfred is right there. We also have the Blood Knights as well. Undeath Resurgent does go down to try and keep these guys alive and safe, but still a rough spot to be in. And meanwhile, you'll notice I drop Rune of Wrath and Ruin, one on this unit of Graveguard over here, and another on this unit of Graveguard over here. I want to cap these guys off as quickly as possible, try and help both of my flanks at the same time. In retrospect, I could have shared the Rune of Wrath and Ruin between these two guys, but I believe, if I recall correctly, this Runesmith was just too far to actually reach these guys. So instead, I do the next best thing, and I send these Slayers in for a rear charge. You'll notice these guys very low on morale in critical binding, and as these Slayers come diving in with their axes, flying in, kicking, and hurling their axes, the Graveguard actually start crumbling right away. So just using the Slayers as if they were cavalry to get side and rear charges in and cause that morale damage to make sure everything is crumbling from my opponent's side. And at this point as well, you'll notice Manfred is all the way over here, probably pretty low on his wins, and I'm just chasing them around with my Slayers. The Slayers maybe had some better uses here. These Rangers as well opening shots off at the Blood Knights and Manfred, so there were maybe some better places they could be at. Meanwhile, the White King over here dives into my Runesmith to try and cause some damage, and again in a tough spot, but I pop Rune of Negation again on both flanks to make sure that the White King isn't able to do as much work as he'd obviously like to, and again just keeping my Dwarfs alive as the Blood Knights and Manfred here continue to be chased by these Slayers. The Rangers finally do decide to open shots off at these Graveguard instead, as this unit of Longbeards does retreat, so just getting some shots in, trying to cause some hurt. These guys are crumbling already, so they'll fall apart pretty readily, while the Blood Knights over here managed to get a nice charge into the Longbeards, but unfortunately there's no more support. Rune of Negation was still active when the charge came in, so you'll see the vampire counts do start falling apart. The White King is basically all that's left. Bit of a mistake here. The Ulthar's Raiders just standing there looking pretty, not getting anything done, unfortunately. A little neglected, but Manfred does fall, and a Pyrrhic victory for my Dwarfs. Now, my opponent had some really good thinking here. Regenerating units were kept to a minimum, possibly out of fear that I might bring in units that easily negate that advantage with fire damage. There's no need to have too much cavalry, though the Blood Knights weren't an ideal unit to take against Dwarfs, and Skeleton Warriors add some cheap width that allows an encirclement, but that advantage wasn't taken. Now, the Dwarves can also be pinned in place so that the hammer can come in with the Skeleton Warriors, but again, the cavalry wasn't used as a hammer enough. They were distracted and running away from my Slayers for far too long. Now, unfortunately, of course, I had two units of Slayers that were very persistent in their hunt for the vampires on horseback, which isn't really common. We don't see that often, at least I haven't seen it that often, and when they weren't chasing after those vampires on horseback, they were getting rear charges into enemy infantry. Beyond that, good rune use helped keep my army alive at crucial moments, and splitting the battle into 3 distinct engagements gave me an advantage over the vampire counts who much prefer a mosh pit. As always, for more Total War content, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Total Breakdown and my own online battles will continue on, of course, and once again, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the battlefield.